The Australian icons, modern Sydney, the Sydney Harbour Bridge, and the famous Opera House. Duana Barnum and I, good travel friends, now retired from teaching at FLCC and looking to enjoy the world, selected Australia as one of our first destinations. I'm not particularly a city person, but the city of Sydney had much to offer and a number of attractions which I could not miss, and happened to be on the airline route of the most economical stop. The cities, one thing, large congested cities of several million, rush hour traffic, aggravated particularly by traffic going on the wrong side of the road. An absolutely impossible nightmare to rent a car and drive in such a situation, first off. The bus service in Sydney is phenomenal. We took a long ride, almost an hour in fact, for a very economical price, to Palm Beach and to the Barrenjoey State Historical Park, a place of great natural beauty and evident of the tropical vegetation which exists in the Sydney area. The city itself, one of the major attractions, the Darlington Harbour, the Sydney Aquarium. Now, I happen to be very fond of marine shows. The ocean itself, much of my life has been associated with the sea. Australia, with its Great Barrier Reef and phenomenal diversity of marine creatures, has developed one of the world's finest museums. Amazing feature of this particular setup is the huge tunnels which actually go under the water. You walk through these long tunnels and have the fish, and in this case the beluga, swim right over your head and watch them up close and personal. The lighting is excellent, the views highly unusual. To be nose to nose with a great shark is really quite an experience. The manatees, the sea cow, I'm not sure, this is not the same species we have in Florida, must go through a truckload of romaine lettuce on a given day. Docile, peaceful creatures, these. The ocean itself generates a very wonderful sense of ease and peace, and to see it in such a manner is particularly gratifying. The great spotted eagle rays, looking up through the surface of the water, a fisheye view to be sure. The variety and brilliance of colors of tropical fishes is something that I will never get over. Many of these creatures of very primitive ecological origin, some of the modern bony fishes, equally as beautiful, a sinister sawfish, one of my favorite elasmobranchs, members of the shark family. The Sydney Harbour Bridge and the Opera House, the iconic items of the city of Sydney, and in fact all of Australia. Lodgings through travel agent, relatively simple and actually quite inexpensive, but you get what you pay for. We didn't pay much in that particular situation. Blue Mountain State Park rental vehicle traveling north and west out of Sydney toward the Taranga Western Plains Zoo, our first major destination. We planned a 3-day journey, a 1-day journey, but it took us 3 days. Australia turns out to be huge. coming over the mountains from Sydney with a tropical forest environment there, a montane savannah environment on the western side, and up toward the city of Dubbo, where the zoo was located, the countryside changes in a dramatic way. Diminishing rainfall, changing soils, open grassland, agricultural areas. The zoo itself, not unlike other major zoos of the world, sports the charismatic large animals, the megafauna. The rhinoceroses were gorgeously up close and personal. I don't understand how somebody could have cut that rhinoceros's horn without the rhinoceros reacting in a negative way. Savannah cats, the great cheetah, enclosed in apparently unfenced regions, although deep water and a fence above the edge of the water makes it pretty safe. They don't manage to get out too easily. A very evident attempt to make a wonderful environment for the animals, to give them this open area and habitat similar to what they're used to. Hardly can be called jungle, but indeed zoo animals do live for much longer than they would in the wild, and do provide an opportunity for people to see them up close and personal. You won't take care of something that you don't know, and something particularly that you don't love. To come to know these creatures is to add a bit of conservation effort. Animals behaving as they do in the wild. Some of the creatures are quite docile. The vegetarian wallabies, a marsupial relative, the kangaroo relatives, were docile, friendly, and really liked human attention. It's quite a thrill to be close to such unusual animals as these. I just absolutely adore the gait of the kangaroo. We'll see that in a few other instances as well. The great noisy cockatoo, the emu, a flightless bird native of Australia, and the absolutely cuddly koala bear feasting on fresh eucalyptus branches, which are imported on a regular basis for this creature. And other mammals, very different. You get a little bit jaded by looking at gray squirrels and red foxes and raccoons and woodchucks in western New York. To see these marsupials up close and personal is a real thrill. That Joey, the baby kangaroo, hopped right in the pouch of the mama kangaroo. Not a sack the way you imagine, but simply an opening which closes up and houses the young kangaroo. Not so little that one was. The wallaby back for some more attention. Took a real shine to Duana. Another flightless bird, one of the largest in the world, the ostrich. Gray kangaroos, there are a number of species of these marsupial family. Their motion is bizarre. The slow gait, utilizing to some degree the atrophied almost front legs, but the tail and the hind legs do the bulk of the motion when they want to take off, and they do their classic kangaroo gait. The gray kangaroo, the red kangaroo, the largest of the kangaroo species, massively powerful hind legs. The most active Galapagos tortoises that I've observed, these come from the South Pacific Islands, and indeed live literally hundreds of years with a very placid, slow-moving, tortoise-like demeanor. Huge these things are, several hundred pounds. Leaving the zoo and headed west and a little bit south toward Swan Hill, the destination of our first hosts, encounters the grazing country. Australia is very much cattle country, the land of the horseman and the beef wrangler. The vegetation changes as rainfall diminishes. The desert scrub, the outback, dead, flat, dry, occasional vegetation, the savannah forests here and there. But as we traveled through the states of New South Wales and Victoria, we encountered virtually every environment that Australia has to offer.
Wow.
The grassland outback in the western portion of our circuit. The emu, I'm not sure whether these were wild or domesticated. I would suspect possibly both categories. A little bit closer to Swan Hill, somewhat more vegetation. We took an excursion into one of the state parks to observe the eucalyptus forests and the billabong watering holes. Not terribly well maintained. In fact, we should have had an off-the-road vehicle, but tried it anyway. Had to scout our route and get up a good head of steam to make sure we did not get mired in the mud. Didn't have my chainsaw with me and came upon obstructions of fallen trees, which in some cases we could drive around, but once we got deeper into the wildness of this area,
that's what happens.
And I'm not sure what you call them, a flock or a herd, kangaroos everywhere. Good. Countryside, west and south, headed toward Melbourne. Close association with the ocean in Australia, particularly on this coast. Our hosts in this area were very much associated with the ocean, a cottage on the ocean side and actually a sailboat, which is part of their recreational practice. Okay, yeah, whoops.
Well, you're just coming up.
Closer to the ocean, vegetation develops more tree-like, somewhat more precipitation. The forest response is evident.
No, I don't think we have many funnel webs. We have a few white-tailed.
Much about the line down here.
Never did get used to driving on the wrong side of the road. It's one thing to be out there, but sometimes entering the right-of-way, you have to think pretty hard lest you get yourself into trouble. The oceanside near Mornington, recreational boating, a great deal of sailing. Mild climate. It's subtropical to tropical. The mountains catch snow, but generally it's a very mild climate. And this is now late November. We're entering the Australian summer, and clearly it's not adverse to ocean recreation. We took a marine ferry over to South Australia and did the Great Ocean Drive, renowned for its views of the ocean, and happened to encounter the Great Victoria Bike Race. It's not really a competition, but people get together for exercise and out of tradition. It started back in the 80s, but in 2004 there were 8,400 bikers that went as much as 700 kilometers. You can go a 3-day or a 5-day or a full 7-day. They actually closed the road in one direction to facilitate the safety of this mass of bikers. It's a wonderful social activity, and in keeping with the Australian habit, phenomenal exercise. Australians do believe in good bodily health and good activity, and bike riding is extraordinarily popular among many of the people. All ages engage here, all the way from kids on up to this 87-year-old made the 700-kilometer run.
30.
Undeveloped, unspoiled, a very beautiful, contiguous ocean-land roadway. We did manage to get down onto the beach and explore. Excellent sand and, as one would expect, some pretty impressive marine algae. I don't know what it is about these things that makes you want to pick it up and pull on it, but it seems to be a pretty natural activity. The encampment, every night the bikers unload the trailers, pitch their tents, and when you're talking 8,000 people, you're talking many, many, many tents. This is really quite an impressive setup. A huge organizational effort to get this thing going, but people obviously love it dearly. Coming back via ferry to the Mornington area after a nice day's excursion. Traveling east out of Melbourne, we encountered the Healsville Sanctuary, an area that specializes in avian education. Absolutely gorgeous birds, many of them phenomenally well trained.
Now, these birds.
To see these things perform and behave is to generate an understanding and an appreciation, and hopefully a willingness to create conditions for these animals in their natural habitats, which will ensure their survival over the years.
An emu egg with me. Others have learned how to get into these eggs, and Bernice is about to show.
Educated raptor has a big egg to crack with a prize inside it. How does a bird crack a big egg? Well, we'll see.
A simple rock. Let's see what happens. Picks up the rock. Lines up the egg. Oh, you can do better than that. Here we go again, this time. There we go, she's got that egg. Beautiful, well done. Now, that happened pretty quickly. If you missed that, what she did is she picked up a rock.
Who is an Australian kestrel. Isn't he beautiful? So even though he is small, Rusty has that hooked meat-tearing beak like all the...
Here comes Ted.
An Australian sense of humor. They
Come to join us, you want to say?
selling toilet paper to raise money for bird preservation.
Back watching the show, it's pretty good. Yeah. Seen some amazing adaptations today of parrots and birds of prey. Kevin, can you tell me what the most amazing adaptation of all birds is? Wings. Wings are really important.
Clear as a bell.
Wings to be able to fly. The black as they age. Jess here is a pretty dark bird. That's because he's the eldest animal here at the park. He's actually 40 years old.
There is a fascination and beauty to raptors.
Carrion is also eaten, so it helps rid the land of dead animals. Now these birds in the wedge-tailed eagle.
Powerful claws and talons of these creatures.
Up in the skies above us, wild wedge-tailed eagles, who also consider this patch of...
My all-time favorite. As a child, I was fascinated with the Tasmanian devil. This is a carnivorous, a seriously meat-eating marsupial. Ferocious little beasts with huge jaw muscles. They're able to crush bones, to crack open hollow bones to get the marrow out. The flying foxes, monster bats. We saw a number of these in the wild, migrating, coming out at dusk. Huge creatures, a three-foot wingspan or more. The fruit-eating bats, they're not vampire types. The Komodo dragon.
He's roughly about 2 to 3 months old. Hopefully he'll come down here, but the reason the female was brought to us as an...
They used to be fairly common up in the hills.
Yeah, the male ibis are probably the hardest ones to spot.
And the koala, again, feasting on eucalyptus foliage. Cuddly creatures. You can understand why they're so favored by kids. Pose with a koala bear. Not really a bear. Heading east and north out of the Melbourne area, head toward Sydney now, hitting an area where sufficient rainfall creates an absolutely gorgeous eucalyptus forest. And there are 50 or more species of eucalyptus, several of which are highly valued timber.
Country. We're not a heavily forested country. Only about 3% of the country is supposed to be covered by forest, but there is a lot of country, so there's a lot of forest.
The Australian stew plant, the radiata pine, which is favored in New Zealand as well, a native of North America, of California. The most important timber species in New Zealand. The high elevations, the Australian Alps, are of sufficient elevation to gain snow in the winter. Entering the summer, as we are here, the snow has melted.
There's a lot of timber here.
An Australian poet.
Shelter and they're too big.
Quite a variety of vegetation.
I quite like them.
Ranching, cattle raising, prairie lands predominate the Australian countryside. Yes, there are kangaroos. Based on the number of carcasses we found along the roadway, I would venture to say they're every bit as dense as white-tailed deer in Ontario County, New York. The natives install what they call rhubards on the front of their pickup trucks. That the collisions between vehicles and kangaroos in the kangaroo territory are very frequent. We were cautioned to drive slowly, if not at all, during the change of light. Almost into Melbourne, we stopped at the Yarango Billy State Park and found a nice place to put up our tent. I awakened in the morning to encounter close at hand a gray kangaroo that did not take alarm at my presence and went about his kangaroo habit, gentle vegetarians that they are. It'd be hard to catch one if you wanted to run it down. They're pretty fleet of foot. Simple camping fare. Oh, I love my coffee, but we were harassed by, and I'm not sure what species this was, a bird that would have stolen our breakfast if we'd given it a chance. Again, coming down on the windward side of the mountains, there is adequate moisture, a large reservoir, dam, irrigation water for very active agricultural efforts. Coming over the coastal mountain range into the Sydney suburbs carried us back into familiar territory. The usual ritual of returning the rental vehicle, finding a motel close to the airport, gave us a few moments to reflect upon the first leg of our 5-week journey. Australia is huge. Travel times were far greater than anticipated. The route from Sydney via Swan Hill to Melbourne and back to Sydney through the states of New South Wales, Victoria, and briefly into South Australia carried us through the full range of Australian environments, including desert shrub, or the Outback, which is so characteristic of much of Central Australia. Allow me to leave you with two of my most memorable images of Australia, the ubiquitous kangaroo and my dearly beloved carnivorous marsupial, the ferocious Tasmanian devil.